If I can think of one driver on the grid who is known for falling out with his teammates, has a habit of colliding with other cars, talks big and throws his weight around even though he doesn't have the skill to back it up, it has to be Esteban Ocon. And despite still being only 27 years old, he is the more senior driver at Alpine and has the car tailored towards him, particularly the cockpit layout. He is getting beaten on the regular by his new and more capable teammate, Pierre Gasly. So I guess the big question here is, does Esteban Ocon have an attitude problem? So I'm just going to dive straight into this and say that Ocon, on his day, is a good points collecting driver. He's strong enough when he wants to be, and if he were out of contract now, I think there would be a number of teams in the midfield and towards the back who would be eyeing him up. But I think where Ocon falls down is that he is just straight up not as good as he thinks he is. No, I'm not trying to bash Ocon here, I'm trying to look at this and be as fair as possible. He attempts these risky and daring overtaking moves on track, but because he lacks that extra little something, that extra 1 or 2% of skill level, he ends up colliding with other cars, or making an error, or even worse, colliding with his teammates. But hey, all drivers make mistakes from time to time, but the absolute greats have the skill to recover from it and not make it an issue, or if they are really at fault, address the situation head on and make an apology or even retract something that they've said. He also has a pattern of ongoing tension with his teammates, whether this is Gasly, Alonso, Ricciardo, Perez, or even Verline when they started off at Manor together. Now the other thing is, I'm not saying any of these drivers are saints. What I'm saying is that he has never had a positive ongoing relationship with a teammate, nor has he ever beaten his teammates in the Drivers' Championship. Just food for thought. And from all this, his priority seems to be beating his teammates, which he has kind of failed at, but all F1 drivers have this priority, this thing built into them, and this is absolutely fine, just so long as it doesn't harm the performance of the team or damage the harmony within the team and its personnel overall. And also his beef with Pierre Gasly has now found its way onto the track, and this is something that went on in the past, but there has been numerous incidents with them on track this year. And I guess the blame has been split kind of 50-50 here, but it's still kind of interesting that this has now happened, even though they both agreed that there would be no kind of contact between them. Ocon seems to be the more senior and favoured driver at Alpine right now, but it's interesting because currently Gasly is outperforming Ocon on a regular basis. Ocon is a good driver, but not a great one, and it seems that since getting his first win at Silverstone in 2021, he's become a lot more aggressive and a lot more punchy, but the thing is, he doesn't have that raw skill and raw ability to facilitate it and back it up like Hamilton or Verstappen would. Now, it might be a lack of self-awareness and not knowing what you don't know, but he seems to be kind of continuously popping up in these kind of incidents, and he doesn't seem to be all that popular amongst the other drivers either. So just look at the incident in Brazil with Alonso. Ocon clearly made a mistake trying to correct himself on the curb, slid over and hit Alonso. Okay, these things happen in F1, but the thing is to go on the radio and call Fernando an effing idiot and then later on not apologise or retract that. The thing is, Esteban, you're not warming yourself to the fans or the drivers there. Had he did what Hamilton did a few races back after his collision with Russell, where he said something negative on the radio and then later on apologised for it and took it back, you would kind of think, okay, well, that's kind of a class move. I think fair play to Ocon for doing that, and you move on. But the fact that he's adamant that he's still in the right and that Alonso didn't leave enough room and he didn't even take back calling Alonso an effing idiot just shows what is going on in his head. And it's these kind of things that make me think that Ocon does have an attitude problem in F1. And if he doesn't kind of change his ways or kind of correct himself and look at how he's dealing with problems and situations, he's going to find his F1 career ending a lot sooner than he thinks. So why does Ocon have this glaring reputation that is so standout compared to other drivers? Well, unlike other drivers, Ocon's journey to F1 was a bit of a struggle. Ocon doesn't come from a wealthy background, so it was a continuous case of his dad having to scrimp and save and everything. and to fight and struggle every single step of the way. So perhaps this kind of created a sense of urgency in Ocon's mind, and an attitude where every step of the way needs to be fought and there is a battle to be had at every single step. And unlike some of the other drivers we see nowadays, he wasn't just plonked into a quick car straight away either. He became part of the Renault family pretty early on and competed in the lower formulas, and he also did a bit of testing for the team when it was Lotus Renault as well. His first proper taste of F1 was in the slow but lovable Manor F1 team, and this was back in 2016 along Pascal Wehrlein, and even then Ocon had tensions and tussles with his teammates. Fast forward a couple of years, and after having a drive with Force India, which later became Racing Point, and we again find him scuffling with his teammate Sergio Perez. And then he loses the seat in 2019 because Daddy Stroll's bought the team and wants to give his son Lance a seat. Now, we'll never know this feeling, but losing your seat in that sort of manner has got to absolutely wreck your head. And also, it's going to give you a pretty big chip on your shoulder as well. But then it's also not knowing if your career's finished and if you're going to stand a chance to rebuild a career in F1, or if you're just going to fall into the wilderness of test driving or, God forbid, winding up in Formula E. Yeah, it must have been a very tough time for him mentally. But then he did recover. He managed to secure a test driver role at Mercedes for 2019 and then a proper race seat at Renault for 2020. But after all this happened, he must have said to himself, I'm not going to let anyone or anything get in my way of being in F1 ever again. And this could be why we're seeing Ocon the way he is now, kind of a more amplified version of the driver he was before, simply because F1 at one point was taken away from him. And I think there's a chance that this is attributed to some of the traits that he has as an F1 driver, but also as a human being as well. Fast forward a bit more, and it brings us back to today, where he's at Alpine. Now, having this selfish, aggressive, unapologetic approach is absolutely fine if you're a Verstappen, Hamilton, Schumacher, or a Senna. And this is because you have that sheer skill, ability, and the results to back it all up. And this is where I think Ocon's biggest failing is. Just look at the Mexican Grand Prix recently before he attempted an overtake on Hülkenberg. He said on the radio to tell Haas, "Get ready because I'm going to go for it," or something along those lines, only to fail and look pretty pathetic afterwards. Those 12 seconds from when he said that on the radio to when he failed to overtake on the corner just summarises perfectly everything about the character and attitude of Esteban Ocon right now. This isn't Days of Thunder, you're not Tom Cruise, and I've never seen a recent driver with so much of a gap between ego and outright ability. He's absolutely delusional right now. And flipping it over to his teammate, in contrast to Ocon, Gasly is a much more quieter, humble, and therefore likeable driver who doesn't find himself in the same sort of incidents and dramas as his teammates. And this kind of creates a little bit of a problem for Alpine right now, because the current car, particularly the cockpit setup, is very much geared towards Ocon because he's taller, has a longer reach. Pierre Gasly has to kind of work harder in the cockpit to make it suit him. But right now, Gasly is ahead of Ocon in the Drivers' Championship, and this wasn't in the script for Alpine at all. Ocon is supposed to be the Renault guy. He has roots with the team. He's French. He's supposed to be the front man that the whole team is going to get behind and be successful. And this other guy, Pierre Gasly, he's supposed to be the stand-in. He's effectively the third choice because Alonso and Piastri didn't want anything to do with the team. And Gasly, the guy who still has the dust from Red Bull and AlphaTauri on his boots, came into the team and he's beaten Ocon fair and square. Okay, Gasly might have had a little bit more luck, but he's still beating him. Now, the 2024 car is being built on a far more neutral ground, so it's going to be intriguing how these two fare against each other next year. Now, the other thing is the F1 fans and the likability factor. Being likable and commercially viable plays a huge part in being part of what makes a successful F1 driver. Okay, you need to be quick, but it helps a lot to have these other factors as well. It can make a huge difference in attracting sponsors, increasing coverage, shifting merch, being on people's radar, all these sorts of things. And just as a little sample, right now on Instagram, Ocon has 2.2 million followers. Meanwhile, Gasly has 4.6 million. Now, of course, Instagram isn't the be-all, end-all way to judge who's popular and likable and who isn't, but it might serve as a little bit of an indication for Alpine that Gasly can perhaps get you into places that Ocon can't. I personally think he has the tools to be a very good F1 driver, but the way he's kind of operating right now, he just is not doing himself any favours. And this is really kind of holding him back a bit as well. So how can Ocon turn things around and show us really what he can do when he's at his best? First things first, straight away, get out of Alpine. I covered Alpine in a recent video, but now that Ocon is now part of the furniture of the team, it's almost kind of like being a coffee table on the Titanic. Don't try and be brave, grab a life jacket, do your best Billy Zane impression, get the hell off, and hope that a ship appears in the shape of Sauber or Haas or even Andretti. Because right now we've got a troubled driver in a troubled team, and that is just a recipe for disaster. At least with Gasly, he can kind of go to Alpine and say, yeah, Red Bull used to do it this way, or AlphaTauri kind of did things a little bit like this, and offer like a different perspective. With the amount of young talent coming through now, Ocon won't get a drive at a top team, and arguably he never was going to anyway. Even when he was a test driver at Mercedes in 2019, there were some murmurs that he was being talked to replace Bottas for the 2020 season and run alongside Hamilton. But Toto Wolff looked at Ocon and looked at what he was potentially bringing to the table, didn't really like what he saw, and let him go in a very kind of PR-friendly way. And then alongside Fernando Alonso at Alpine, Ocon claimed that he was having to do all the heavy lifting and all the hard work at the team whilst they were both there. All the simulator time, testing, marketing trips, PR, all that sort of stuff. But of course you did, because he's Fernando Alonso and he has the weight to specify certain things in his contract that he doesn't have to do. You're Esteban Ocon, crack on. And also, rather than actively falling out with Alonso and doing that whole sort of thing, wouldn't it have been better to soak up everything he knows and every last ounce of information and experience he has and put that to use later in your career? I guess what it comes down to is if you're going to be a bullish and punchy driver, you better have the racecraft to back it up and also the smarts to know when to play the game. Because right now, Ocon is a bullish and punchy driver, don't get me wrong, but he has a habit of running into other cars and is unwilling to play the game. Perhaps Alpine need to come down hard on him, and in fact, it's actually strange that they haven't done so already. In fact, actually, given the state of Alpine, perhaps Alpine need Ocon than Ocon needs the team. I mean, it's clear now that Ocon and Alpine just want to get this season done and over with and focus on next year, but looking at everything that we're seeing, is there going to be much of an improvement for next year? I don't see any signs to show this. I see no indication that things are going to get any better for either of them next year. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how they go about it and what 2024 brings to them. So there we go. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and please be sure to like, share and subscribe. Thank you for all your support on the channel so far. I'm Paul, and I'll see you later. Cheers.